My name is Charlotte Coalter, and I am here to talk about my piece, Reflections. So what my piece is about. So the outline of my piece is an exploration of what shame and guilt, how it makes us feel, behave, and how it makes us behave on a daily basis, and really what drives these feelings personally for every person.
Come to rehearsals and learn new material that Charlotte had created for us, as well as learning technique that inspired her for her work. So overall, I really enjoyed the process, and it was very well organised, very well thought through, and it wasn't stressful, and she was very understanding of the piece, as it was quite a dark piece and could have been a real struggle for some people, but she really understood, and it was enjoyable to work with something that was very dark and take this towards yourself. So the most challenging part I found was trying to connect at the beginning, as I didn't understand much about shame or guilt, and to me I thought as though they were a very similar thing until Charlotte explained and was speaking to us about her research that she had found. So I thought it was very challenging trying to connect these two emotions, which are completely different but at first felt so similar, into a character which at the time was myself, until I had chosen to turn myself into a different character because it was difficult to try and personally connect shame and guilt to myself. And I felt as though when it was myself I was doing it wrong, because what I might have felt ashamed for wasn't actually shame, it was guilt. So I chose to take on the role as a homeless person and create a storyline where I could define the difference between shame and guilt. But the most challenging part was definitely before I'd come up with an idea of being a character.
So my process involved using the Grotowski Method, and the core of his method is about audience involvement, authentic emotion, and a lot of it is about emotional confrontation and getting the dancers to be aware of their physical and mental reactions in the space. And it's about getting them to not just a core of a character, but to the core of their kind of beliefs and their morals. And it's by integrating and also disregarding this kind of face that we put on every day in different situations. And it's about looking at that and seeing, what do I do? Why do I react like that? So we do have different characters, which is helpful for some people, and it helps sometimes to keep it in the studio and not always take it out, which is something that's very important, by bringing people in and out of that process. But that's mainly what drove me to go towards the Grotowski technique, just because of its striving for that raw emotion, that real place in someone, and sharing that with an audience. It's about really connecting it with an audience, and that's a lot of what we work on with the dancers, about real interactions with each other, about whenever they look towards the audience, it's not as in classical theatre where you kind of don't really acknowledge that they're there. It's about really bringing them into your world so they can see kind of what kind of journey you're going on. So that's what really drove me to choose him. So the psychoanalytic theory is different from psychoanalysis in the fact that it's not about the treatment, this is about just understanding. So it's really about investigating about someone's personality, which is a breakdown which comes from Sigmund Freud. And it's someone's individual motivation to do something, an unconscious mental thought process and their conscious one, which looks into impulses, ideas, repressed emotions, things that we won't freely talk about or openly admit, as well as the coping mechanisms that we develop while we're maturing over the years, and looking primarily into guilt and fear and shame, which is also a part of Freud's theory. So a lot of these things are things that we have learned through family and cultural influences, and the standards that we are put into a society, of what should make us satisfied, of the goals that we should be hitting. And all of these things make up our personality and our morals and all the different relationships that we have. So basically, whenever you break down the personality psychologically, you have your ID, which in this clip that I'm showing now is what I kind of got them to think about, how they react, what their impulses are, and to not think so much about what they're going to do next, just react to what's happening in the space. And Luke is one of the ones who I'm dancing with in this duet who is very good at just reacting very freely. So your ID is like instant gratification, it's your impulses, it's those flickers of ideas that you have. And then we move on to the ego, which is the logical, conscious part of the mind. It basically balances the risk of like what we want and what is possible in reality at that point in time. And then lastly is the superego. So this is really what a lot of shame and guilt is based on. So it's your social and moral values that a person develops as they grow up. So it's looking into it makes someone's conscience. So this also links very much with shame and guilt, which is what we were investigating about our environment and our experiences, and it weighs the consequences of our actions. So it's a lot that, like, I know this is wrong, but if it's what I want, is it worth doing it? So it's really weighing those different sides. So this is what I did with the psychoanalytic theory as we were moving through the piece, and I did a lot of lesson planning, and we had sometimes discussions that went on for an hour. We would write out on the whiteboard, and we would go around in the group and each kind of discuss what we thought it was and then compare it with my research. So this really helped in the fact that it helped the dancers not only understand where I'm coming from, but understanding what they would get out of this, how they would react. So after talking about this research and then also comparing this with Grotowski, they actually integrate with each other very well, because that psychoanalytic theory gives the dancers the understanding of what makes their personality, of really delving deep and looking into what kind of makes them them. And then in Grotowski, it's a similar kind of thing. It's looking into externalizing it, which also goes into psychosomatics as well. But it's that authentic emotion, that emotional confrontation, and then using vocal and body reactions to do something.
Hi, I am Luke. I am a dancer in Charlotte Coalter's piece Reflections. I really enjoyed the entire creative process, working under the direction of Charlotte, cooperating with her in and out of the studio. The process was really intriguing for me because Charlotte enabled us, specifically like me, as a dancer in her piece, to creatively explore her themes, but in my own way in the studio. I enjoyed it because, within the space, I was able to feel relaxed, which was important given the subject matter specifically for me, because what was going on in my personal life, even though I tried to keep that separate, I was able to explore those emotions in a space that I felt safe and comfortable, which Charlotte helped to create. I think for me, personally, the most challenging thing sometimes was getting straight into the correct headspace and being focused from the get-go. Especially with everyone after a long day, I sometimes got a bit giddy because I was so tired. But eventually, with the help of Charlotte, I was able to get into that headspace and with the other dancers. It sometimes meant, though, that it took a little longer to get into the movement phrases than we could have done, but because of the techniques that Charlotte used, such as the breathing techniques, it really helped to focus my mind. I think as we moved through the sessions, I definitely became more aware of the dancers within the space and how we moved together, but also the sounds and the objects in the space. We really focused on, like, when we spoke and made sounds, where did that resonate off? Could we hit, where was that hitting in the space? Who could hear that? And the same with the other dancers, could we hear them? Where we were hearing them from? and the different things of like how close we stood to a dancer or so I definitely became more aware of everyone within the space, not only myself. And within that space, I definitely fed off the energy created with the other dancers in the studio. It definitely fueled my creative side, and I was able to play with their reactions, which was really fun to do.
I found it affected me in the space initially to start with because I was a bit nervous, but once I kind of got over that and I realised that we were all in the same position, it was quite fun and it was enjoyable and everybody was quite encouraging.